This is the story of a beautiful and wealthy couple, a young American named Joe and a stunning Russian woman named Olga. They got married and headed to the Virgin Islands for their honeymoon on the beach. It was a paradise, and life seemed perfect. However, the happy lovers had no idea that a countdown had begun, and they only had 107 days left together as a family. The Connell family lived in Wilmington, Delaware, USA. They had 3 children, but later the parents divorced, which came as a shock to everyone. The children stayed with their mother. The eldest was John, the middle child was Joseph, and the youngest was a girl named Kelly. As kids, they were a noisy bunch, often quarreling over trivial things. But as they grew older, they found common ground and became very close. Their mother also started a new relationship with another man who became like a second father to them. The family lived in a comfortable and quiet neighborhood. They were well off, allowing them to grow up without any financial constraints. The middle son, Joseph, whom everyone called Joe, grew up to be an enterprising young man. Sometimes he was overly meticulous and rigid, but only when it came to business. Overall, he was a fun guy, the life of the party. He always raised the energy in any gathering and was very sociable. Joseph was doing well in life. He co-owned an auto repair shop and a store with one of his best friends, Christopher. Their partnership was successful. They were passionate about their business and worked hard to grow it. During this time, Joseph Joe met Olga online, a young woman from Russia. Both were in their 30s and had been burned in previous relationships. They were both searching for love. The two quickly hit it off as they had friendly, vibrant personalities that drew people to them. Joe had been a committed bachelor. He never imagined he'd meet such a beautiful blonde who would completely turn his life and his beliefs upside down. They started talking every day, spending hours together online, and grew so close that Olga flew to the U.S. straight from Siberia. Joseph was not disappointed when they met in person. He was enchanted by her beauty and gentle, easygoing nature. The feeling was mutual. Olga also took a liking to Joseph. They started dating, and their relationship progressed rapidly. Joseph's family quickly grew fond of the Russian beauty, who seemed inseparable from their son. She appeared delicate and sensitive, but beneath that shy exterior was a highly energetic and capable woman who could handle anything. The whole family adored her, believing she was the only one who could truly settle their middle son down. Of course, she hadn't come to America for nothing. Joseph had promised to marry her, so the Connells decided to have a wedding fairly quickly. And that's when the problems began. The first issue was the engagement ring. By family tradition, the mother wanted to pass down her ring to her son, but it had already been given to her daughter, Kelly, who had married 10 years earlier. It was an expensive piece, a diamond-encrusted ring worth around $20,000. Joseph took the ring from his sister and secretly replaced the diamonds with cubic zirconia before returning it to Kelly. The real diamonds were set into a new ring for Olga, with the plan to later swap them back and return the stones to his sister's ring. The idea was that neither woman would notice. Of course, no one intended to deceive Kelly. They planned to return everything. But things dragged on. Eventually, Kelly noticed the difference in the stones and was furious. She confronted her brother, who was deeply upset. He believed she was trying to break family tradition and grew angry over it. The wedding ceremony took place in the Virgin Islands, United States of America. However, the groom's sister was not present. She was still upset with the couple and had to work that day. Nevertheless, she found time to send Olga a few sharp messages about her engagement ring. At the time, the bride had no idea what Joseph had done to the jewelry to give her such a wedding gift, so Kelly's rudeness soured the joyous moment. From then on, constant arguments erupted between brother and sister. Just a few weeks after the wedding, while the newlyweds were at work, someone broke into their home. The intruder stole a large amount of jewelry, including family heirlooms. However, the Connell family's diamond ring was on Olga's finger at the time, so it was saved. After discovering the break-in, Joseph called the police. Law enforcement examined the scene and began searching for the burglar. Surprisingly, forensic experts found no evidence. If the robbery was real and not staged, the perpetrator was clearly a professional criminal. But they would never get to solve the case. Something far more serious was looming on the horizon for this couple. Sadly, fate had other plans, and a long, happy life together was not in the cards for them. The beginning of their married life was spent in the Virgin Islands in the Caribbean, where they celebrated their honeymoon. There, they enjoyed each other's company, the sea and the sun. They went fishing, sailed on a yacht across turquoise waves, and indulged in fine dining. Money was no issue for the family, so they spared no expense during their wedding trip. Upon returning home, the young Connell family bought a Mercedes worth over $100,000, a brand-new convertible that the head of the household could afford, thanks to being a co-owner of a thriving business. The thriving automotive business brought in around $1 million a year. Olga, a former stock trader, had a deep understanding of economics, finance, and customer relations. She quickly became an integral part of her husband's business, working as an administrator. The attractive Russian blonde with an accent was charming, friendly, and professional, helping to grow their shared enterprise. Everything was perfect until the day the unthinkable happened. On September 23, 2013. Just 3 months after the wedding, gunshots rang out in the Wilmington home where the couple lived. Around 2 a.m., emergency services received a call. A witness reported a woman who had been shot near the condominium in the Peloton Club residential complex. She was still alive at that moment. Medics arrived within minutes and provided first aid to Olga, the victim of the attack. She had been shot multiple times and was bleeding heavily. Despite desperate efforts to save her, she died on the way to the hospital. While inspecting the crime scene, police discovered another body nearby. Joseph, lying in the bushes. He had been killed instantly by a shot to the back of the head. This didn't look like a random robbery. Instead, it appeared the couple had been ambushed as they returned home. Detectives quickly pieced together the details. They suspected the prior home invasion might be connected to the tragic fate that cut short the couple's happiness. Witnesses and neighbors were interviewed immediately, but while many had heard the gunshots, no one had seen the attack. Firsthand, some witnesses reported hearing two loud male voices arguing. Shortly before the shooting, it seemed the men had some kind of altercation with the couple, ending in the newlyweds' deaths. The timeline showed this happened right after Joseph and Olga returned from a febrio. That night, they had been celebrating Olga's 39th birthday with friends and some of Lord Joe's family. They partied, danced, and left after midnight, exhausted but happy. They parked their convertible near the sidewalk and walked toward their condo entrance. Unaware death was waiting. Olga suffered deep multiple gunshot wounds to the face. One bullet entered her cheek and exited through the back of her head. Her husband had been riddled with bullets. Several shots to the body, but the fatal one struck his head. While Joseph lay motionless in the bushes, Olga fought for her life, waiting for help. Police tried to get any clue from her, a name, a hint about the attacker, but she was unresponsive. Nearby, officers found numerous spent shell casings, suggesting multiple shooters. The casings were of different calibers, meaning more than one gun had been used. It was unlikely a single attacker would switch weapons mid-crime. About 25 bullets had been fired, indicating a planned, coordinated attack. Robbery was quickly ruled out. Nothing had been stolen. Joseph still had his wallet with a large sum of cash, and Olga's purse with her phone and jewelry was beside her. Most notably, her finger still bore the expensive wedding ring worth tens of thousands of dollars. After analyzing the scene, police concluded this was a planned ambush. The newlyweds had been targeted and executed near their home with brutal precision. They seemed like a happy, harmless couple. So, what was the motive? As the investigation began, detectives interviewed the victims' relatives. Joseph's mother and stepfather insisted the couple had no known enemies. But, as previously mentioned, everyone knew about Joseph's feud with his sister over the ring. This detail inevitably surfaced during questioning. Some speculated that Kelly might have killed them over the diamonds. Could she really have harbored such hatred that she'd commit double murder for revenge? Yet the ring wasn't stolen, undermining that theory. Strangely, Kelly was among the first to arrive at the crime scene. Despite living in another part of town, she was visibly distraught. Why? And cooperated openly with investigators, even admitting to recent conflicts with her brother. She didn't downplay their disputes. She spoke openly about everything and even showed investigators the angry messages exchanged between her brother, and Olga. The texts made it clear that Olga suspected Kelly of orchestrating the robbery. But Kelly denied any involvement, both in the break-in and the attack on the couple. Strangely, Kelly didn't seem overly concerned about providing an alibi. But by then, evidence had already confirmed the attackers were two men. Detectives also learned that Kelly had been battling breast cancer and had recently undergone grueling treatment. She was still recovering, making it physically unlikely she could have carried out the murders. Yet, police still suspected her involvement, even as facts pointed away from her. They couldn't break her during interrogations, but she remained a suspect due to one glaring motive: greed. Around this time, detectives explored another theory. A crime of passion. Could a jealous ex-lover of Olga or Joseph have targeted them? Investigators dug into both spouses' past relationships, but found no red flags. Olga had no other romantic ties in the U.S., making it improbable that an ex would cross an ocean for revenge. Joseph, meanwhile, was on good terms with his exes. None held grudges. Most were married and uninterested in rekindling anything, so this lead was dismissed. The puzzle grew more complex. Detectives combed through the couple's lives, but both were well-liked and avoided trouble. The marring feud gnawed at investigators. Could it really have driven someone to murder? Their focus shifted to Kelly's husband, Garrett. Could he have acted on her behalf? But Garrett had a solid alibi and vouched for Kelly, claiming she'd been resting at home, unwell, on the night of the murders. Then, Garrett dropped a bombshell. Joseph might have been involved in criminal activity. He doubted Joseph's wealth was earned legally and hinted at shady dealings. This theory gained traction when witnesses revealed Joseph had been illegally selling steroids, a lucrative but high-risk side business. Worse, some pointed fingers at Chris Rivers, Joseph's business partner of 10 years. A close associate claimed Chris had bitterly resented Joseph, accusing him of embezzling profits from their shared auto shop. Joseph allegedly kept all steroid sale earnings for himself, leaving Chris struggling with debts. When detectives questioned Chris, they expected grief, but found cold indifference. He admitted he'd planned to meet the couple at the bar that night, but got tied up with business. Chris also spread dark rumors about Olga. suggesting ties to the Russian mafia, and implying Joseph's wealth was dirty. He eagerly fed police multiple theories, almost too eager to divert suspicion. Despite his odd behavior, investigators had to verify his claims. They soon uncovered Joseph's criminal ties, confirmed by several sources. 2 years before marrying Olga, Joseph had served time for illegal weapons possession. The incident happened in a bar. A brawl broke out, and Joseph grabbed a shotgun from his truck to threaten those involved. He never made it inside with the weapon because police arrived on the scene and detained him. As a result, he was convicted and sent to prison, where he made new connections. Some inmates introduced him to the asteroid trade, and after his release, Joseph dove into the illegal business of selling performance-enhancing drugs. Beyond his legitimate auto shop, Joseph became a well-known figure in the underground steroid market. But could this have been the motive for his murder? Did he cross someone in the black market trade? And was there any truth to the rumors of tri-fade Russian mafia involvement, fighting for control of the business in America? Detectives had to find out. While investigating potential accomplices in Joseph's illegal dealings, police zeroed in on a man named Harry Cook, a local who wanted to become Joseph's business partner in the auto shop. By the time of the murders, Cook had already invested over $100,000 into the venture, giving him a possible motive. However, Cook had a solid alibi for the night of the attack, leaving detectives at a dead end. Meanwhile, Joseph's business partner, Chris Rivers B., kept making suspicious claims. He repeatedly accused Joseph of stealing money from their shop. Police examined the financial records and discovered the business was hemorrhaging cash. Despite high revenue, expenses were spiraling out of control. Money was vanishing. At first, it seemed Joseph might have been embezzling, but the investigation revealed the real thief was Chris himself. Chris was funneling all the money into drugs. His own income wasn't enough. He had been stealing from the shop and his best friend to fund his opioid addiction. This made him the new prime suspect in my eye, with a clear motive. Joseph could have discovered the theft, prompting Chris to eliminate him. Chris's addiction had spun out of control. He was using massive amounts of drugs, drowning in debt and stealing from everyone around him. Recently, he'd begun exhibiting paranoid behavior, claiming people were following him and trying to kill him. Ironically, his own attempts to cover his tracks only made him look guiltier. His first arrest came after he was caught possessing steroids, and he then admitted to secretly selling them out of the auto shop, the same shop he co-owned with Joseph. At first, he blamed Joseph, saying his late friend had been running the operation and keeping all the profits. But evidence soon proved Chris was the real dealer, using the illegal sales to pay off debts to dangerous people. Police discovered a hidden storage room in the shop, set up by Chris specifically for steroid distribution. Under questioning, he confessed, admitting he had started the side business out of desperation and that Joseph had known about it. Chris was arrested 2 more times as the case unfolded, but what really unsettled detectives was his alibi. He eagerly provided surveillance footage from his home, both inside and outside, proving he was there during the murders. The timestamps checked out, but police didn't buy it. Something felt off. Then, detectives pulled Chris's phone records. That night, his call activity spiked dramatically, far more than usual. Most calls were made precisely when the couple was attacked. Although the call log had been deleted from the phone, law enforcement officers easily recovered the call history. Shortly before the business partner was shot dead, his lover, Chris Rivers, had been in contact with a certain Josh Bay. As it turned out, Bay was a buyer of the illegal steroids that Chris was distributing. Moreover, Bay had run off with Chris's stash of banned substances. However, the investigation proved that Josh Bay did not pull the trigger, though he may still have been involved in the murder. On that fateful night, he had made several calls to his acquaintances, Dominic and Aaron. It was likely these two who could have been the ones who carried out the execution of the married couple. In any case, the emerging picture suggested that the victim's business partner was involved in the murder. He had a substantial debt and a strong motive rooted in resentment. He could have hired his drug dealer, Josh Bay, to eliminate the newlyweds. However, instead of doing the job himself, Bay enlisted two of his associates. The scheme was becoming increasingly convoluted. Had the crime gone smoothly, the business partner could have received $1 million from Joe's life insurance payout. Each of the partners had taken out such a policy early in their collaboration when they were just starting their business. In the event of his partner's death, Chris would have received a large sum, enough to solve all his financial problems and pay off his debts. However, he lost his claim to the payout when his partner got married. Now, after the murder, Olga would receive the entire insurance payout, leaving him with nothing. Thus, Chris Rivers needed to eliminate both spouses, his successful friend and his beautiful wife, to gain sole access to the money. This theory was indirectly supported by suspicious exchanges between the mastermind and his accomplices on the night of the double murder. Joe's partner kept texting his drug dealer, Bay, asking where he was and when he'd return home. He was clearly anxious about the success of the plan. The replies were equally ambiguous. Detectives seized 4 cell phones from all suspects linked to the double homicide. The movements of the devices were analyzed using cell tower data, confirming that on September 23, 2013, the persons of interest were near the victims at the time of the shooting. The actual perpetrators, Dominic and Aaron, were tracked near the Connells' house. Bay, who orchestrated the operation, remained in constant contact with his employer, Chris, who was elsewhere. Surveillance footage, which the prime suspect had cited to support his alibi, ended up working against him. It captured his business partner behaving strangely, pacing back and forth in his apartment, visibly nervous, phone glued to his hand. At that moment, he was clearly waiting for a response from the hired killer and coordinating with him. The evidence quickly piled up. Josh Bay himself proved especially helpful when he surrendered to the police, agreed to a plea deal, and testified against Chris. According to Bay, Chris had indeed asked him to kill his auto shop partner and his wife. As payment, Chris gave him an upfront fee of $5,000 and promised an additional $60,000 once Joe and Olga were dead. As part of the plea bargain, Bay testified against Chris in court. A year after the cold-blooded killings, Chris Rivers was charged with conspiracy to commit double murder. The other suspects also faced trial. The hearings began 19 months after the investigation started. Chris's plan ultimately failed, even though he had thought things through quite well. The guy had hoped the investigation would get confused and follow false leads. To achieve this, several plausible scenarios were suggested. The victim's involvement in criminal steroid trafficking schemes, incidents linked to his past, a robbery that occurred shortly before the tragedy, and the feud with his sister. All of this could have misled the police, potentially leading them to arrest someone else. Fortunately, law enforcement didn't fall for the tricks and managed to track down the real killers. The police were able to prove that the robbery at the victim's home before the crime had been staged. Bay was also responsible for this. Acting on Chris's orders, he broke into the Connells' house. His main objective was to find and steal a diamond wedding ring. Had he succeeded, law enforcement would have undoubtedly considered Kelly's sister the prime suspect in the subsequent murder. However, the jewelry wasn't found among the couple's belongings, so the plan failed. During the trials, which were held separately and concurrently for the criminals, Aaron Thompson confessed to his crimes and received 2 life sentences for the double murder charge, plus an additional 45 years after it was proven that he was the one who wielded the weapon. Chris Rivers also received 2 life sentences plus 50 years, as he was the mastermind behind the crime. His accomplice, Dominic Benton, was acquitted of the murder charges. He didn't shoot the couple, but was convicted of conspiracy and aiding the criminals. Dominic was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Josh Bay received only 5 years due to his active cooperation with the police. In this situation, the victim's sister, Kelly, suffered greatly. At one point, the police aggressively pursued her, trying to pin her brother's murder on her, nearly imprisoning an innocent woman. However, she could never have committed a double homicide. Of course, she was deeply hurt by her mother and brother's actions regarding the wedding ring, but it was nothing more than a reason for resentment and verbal clashes. At the funeral, the sister confessed that she had loved her brother dearly and mourned his loss along with the rest of the family.